As you all know, reindeer are an amazing species. They are a remnant from the past, and I would say that their future is largely up to us. Reindeer are high conservation status in Norway and internationally. And in the last UCN assessment, the Red List assessment, they have been actually moved for the first time in history into vulnerable category. And several local populations have been extinct just in the last few years. One of the main reasons for this problem is land use. Reindeer need large and largely undisturbed area, and as you said, well-connected area. And obviously, this is a lot to ask in a country that looks relatively undisturbed compared to other countries, but still looks like this. There are, in reindeer habitat, there are a lot of tourist cabins, a lot of trails, houses, private cabins, roads, and so on and so forth. Obviously, restoration must be a solution to the problem, must be part of the solution, but it cannot be all over. It cannot be done all over Norway. Reindeer inhabit mostly all mountain areas in Norway. So it's all about prioritization. Even if we look at a smaller area, like for example, the Dovre area that has been discussed before, like Snoeter, Knusse, Rondane, well, even if you look at that area, it's still difficult to understand where to actually prioritize. Do we remove one cabin? Do we try to restore the habitat close to a Hittefeld or a hydropower dam? So which area should we prioritize? Which infrastructure? And by the way, are we sure of what we are saying? Because a lot of money, as has been said before, a lot of money are invested in this operation. So we need to be a bit sure. The way we answer the questions is by using a holistic landscape perspective. We are trying to understand both the reindeer movement and the landscape composition and the position of the different infrastructure with respect to each other. Then we want to understand really well the cumulative impacts, because it's not about one hydropower dam, it's not about one tourist cabin, but it's about the whole of it. It's about where they are with respect to each other. And when it comes to are we sure? Well, it's a lot of money to be used for restoration. So we need to be as sure as we can. And therefore we choose to go for quantitative model, data-driven models, of course, supported, highly supported by local knowledge. In one of our projects, we have asked local experts all over Norway to suggest possible mitigation measure and restoration area for reindeer. And then we have developed a new method, an innovative method, to simulate the effect of it, to see what happens if you actually do restoration. Would it be useful? And then when you compare different options, you can see, well, maybe we should prioritize here. So cumulative effects is not just about one hydropower dam or the road that leads to it, or the power line that comes from it, or the tourist area that are next to it, but it's about all of it. So how we work is by trying to understand how each infrastructure affects the habitat loss. For instance, a hydropower dam obviously causes habitat loss, but it also causes fragmentation, the same infrastructure. And we try to quantify for each infrastructure the habitat loss and fragmentation, and we bring it together. This is the most important part of my talk. We bring it together. And by doing this, we had to look into different disciplines. We had to study habitat preference, movement, population dynamics. If you want to have a holistic approach, many things have to be taken into account. And many disciplines are developed through the last century to work on these issues. What we try to do is we try to make a large international collaboration and to bring together all of these disciplines into one framework to study cumulative impacts and ultimately to arrive at a prioritization of area and measures for restoration and sustainable land use. I will not explain the method in detail, but conceptually, imagine an area like this is Rifylke before industrial development. Reindeer were roaming freely through the entire area. Then they started building the hydropower dam, Blåsjø, one of the biggest in Europe, and all the infrastructure, cabins, roads, private cabins, DNT cabin, hydropower power lines, and so on. What we do is we measure the effect of each infrastructure on habitat loss. For instance, a DNT cabin, a tourist cabin, has a bigger effect and a larger radius usually compared to a single private cabin in the mountain. At the same time, the same infrastructure causes fragmentation. So we measure also the effect on fragmentation. So reindeer cannot cross some areas. And the most important part of my talk is this. We try to measure this green area with what is left for reindeer. Once you take away some habitat, once you fragment the rest, what is left in that specific area for reindeer? And if you manage to quantify that, we can play with that situation and we can see what if we add a new road or if we restore an area, what would be the effect of it? And by quantifying this, we can help prioritizing. What should we prioritize, which infrastructure and where? This is just about Snøhetta, the area we discussed before with Dagmar. And you see on the upper part, we have an estimate of habitat quality. So the green area are good quality habitat for reindeer. Fragmentation, so the black areas are barriers, reindeer cannot cross. And then you get what we call the functionality. So these yellow areas are the areas that are good and well connected. This is what is really important for reindeer. So this is useful already for understanding where to prioritize restoration. And here we have movement routes on the right side of the screen. You will see how does a reindeer have to go to reach all these nice good pastures. We can also do it for other seasons. This is the winter season. And then we can test future scenario. So we can test what happens if we restore a habitat, if we do some mitigation measure. We have asked local people, experts, and they have come up with possible mitigation measure. In this particular area, these are the measures. We could focus on the Hechshin area. Part of it has been already done in the project that Dagmar discussed before. Part are hypothetical scenario, including also the removal of Reinheim and trails and other roads. They've been proposing to build a land bridge across Aursjön. They've been proposing to remove Aursjöhytta and the road and Rennebo. Rondaskog. In the next slide, we focus on this particular area because this is obviously the most comprehensive mitigation measure suggested. So you will see here the habitat quality and focus on this infrastructure which have been suggested to be removed. Ranheimen, the trails, and the Herschin-Schittefeld roads. So you will see that the green area now, if I remove all this infrastructure, would increase. You will see more green in this part, right? If you look at the fragmentation, you will see that the dark area, the fragmented, the barriers, will be removed to a large degree. At the same time, what does it matter for reindeer? So the functional habitat, what is really important habitat for reindeer, would increase 20.9% if we remove all these infrastructures. The fragmentation would also decrease and we will get a big corridor exactly where now we have the shooting range. And we assume that we calculated is about 22% movement routes gain. In particular, let's see what happened actually with the mitigation measure that they have been working for a long time in Norway now with the restoration of the shooting range. Before, we had some roads here in Hechshin area. When we remove them, we gain quite a bit of habitat. You see the green increases, the fragmentation decreases. And what happened with reindeer is we gain 7.2% of habitat with the restoration action that has been already implemented. And we gain about 10% of movement routes. If we put together all the results for all areas, we see that, of course, removing all infrastructure around Snøhetta would have the biggest effect, would have 10–12% of habitat gain. Also working on Aursjö is a very big improvement because it would allow reindeer to still continue moving like they were doing before between the east and the west part of Snøhetta. And what has been done now, the restoration in Herschin-Schittefeld, gained 3 to 5% depending on which area you're looking at, which is a good number, but is more to be done. You're wondering probably, this is about reindeer, but can you do it for many species together? Well, actually, yes. So we have tried in a pilot study to do it with moose, with insects associated to old forest, and with bumblebees. And we use different data. With moose and reindeer, we are using GPS data, super data. But we can also use expert data, which are necessary for some species, or literature data. And what we've done is we made the same maps of connectivity and habitat functionality, and we have brought them together into one map, indicating, this is for Ski kommune in south of Oslo, east of Oslo, where we indicate the priority area. If you want to conserve moose, these are the priority areas to be conserved, the yellow areas. If you want to prioritize conservation of old forest insects, these are the core area to be preserved. If you want to prioritize bumblebees, is the other ones. And we can actually bring this together into one map, where we take into account the needs to conserve several species, and this has to be done together with the local authorities, politicians, and the broader society. In this example, I gave the same weight to all the 3 species, but one can decide that pollination is more important than moose, or other choices, depending on the area and on the species. And we also need to decide how much area you want to prioritize. In this example, we prioritize about 17%. So given these premises, and you can of course adjust the parameters, you can get land prioritization based on connectivity, and which would indicate the areas to be prioritized for restoration and sustainable land planning in a more efficient way. Thank you.